Today.
Hi, good, thanks. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for helping us out with this.
Hey, yeah, thanks for getting back to me and everything. Not sure what I'm
My
getting myself
pleasure.
into, but we'll see.
I mean, point of this training, you'll get to see a little bit what we're doing and how we're going to be doing it, and then I'm gonna let you make the determination whether or not this is something that you feel like you have the skill set for, and something that you feel like you could be helpful with. If not, totally fine. We've had something else. We'll make it happen. It'll be
Great.
good. Um, and then also, David, Bruna sent me another metadata person just before this call too. So I'll just probably share with them the video that we record here.
Yeah, let's do that.
So.
Yeah, we'll record this and then, yeah, let's just share the video so that way you don't have to keep doing more and more trainings.
Just keep doing trainings and keep finding these papers. It'll work out. Hello, Leah. How are you doing today?
Yeah, how are you?
Doing good. I realized I started talking while it said you were connecting via audio. And I was like, oh God, maybe she won't be able to do it. But we hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great.
All right. We'll wait a couple more minutes for more people to jump on this call. Hello, Michael. Hello, Vivek. Is it Vivek? Am I saying it right?
Sorry, what was it?
Am I saying your name right?
Oh, yeah,
Is
yeah,
it Vivek?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. The teacher in me is coming out, and I like trying to make sure I say names right. And so I like asking. So sorry to put you on blast for a hot minute there.
No, appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Aaron's back. All right. Let me see. How many more people are here? Showing up. There's 12 of you, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I think we should have about 17 people on this call. Maybe 18. So we'll give people a couple more minutes to jump on the call, and then we'll get started. Hello, everyone else who just came on.
Hey.
All right. How are y'all? Today's Tuesday? Yeah. I feel like being at home, all of the days just like slushed together at this point, and I never know what day it is at this point or what's happening.
Okay, you want me to show you guys something while we wait? Okay.
Yeah, you're going to share something, Aaron? Go for it.
Just a view.
Oh,
that's it.
Bam. Bam. Why you do this to us? That's beautiful, though.
There you go.
I don't know if that makes me feel any better. It is beautiful, but it doesn't necessarily make me feel better.
It's kind of like when you scroll through Instagram and see all these people like doing this.
That's
there you
true.
go.
That's true.
Living their best life. Does the view help or hurt with step studying, though?
Yeah, mixed bag for sure.
Definitely a mixed bag. Definitely things that can happen. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So I think how many people we got here? 12, 13, 14. All right. We just have a couple people left to show up, but I figured they'll jump on as they come on, probably some technological issues. So we're just going to get started. That way we can respect your time. And then I'm sure a lot of you are eager to jump on the boat and start running with these cases so that we can get you guys running this afternoon too. So I'd be appreciative if you could mute yourself if you're not actively talking. That way we just avoid any feedback issues that'll happen, or just make sure that some ambient noise is there. This will also help in terms of the recording. You all know that you guys are being recorded today, just so that we can share this video with anyone else who's coming on after you guys. We don't have to keep doing these recordings. This will also be nice because you then have this as a resource. So if you want to come back and look at it again, if you have some questions and you think we talked about that, but I don't really remember where we went from it, you have that available as well. So what I think is a good place to start, I know you guys sort of introduced yourself yesterday, and I know that a lot of you guys are med students at Penn, so you guys already know each other. But we do have a couple of new people who aren't here, so we just kind of go around really quickly, just like name what you do. And let's do that. Name what you do, because I feel like a lot of you yesterday said why you're interested. So we'll do that. That way you just have a little bit of knowledge of who's there, especially because you're going to see everyone's names and initials on the sides of this document. So it'll be good to at least have a little remembrance there. So my name is Johnson. I'm the center coordinator at David's lab at the Castleman-COVID Center. and I'm doing this project managing for this project here. I'm just going to call on people. So next we'll go with Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm an undergrad at Pitt, the University of Pittsburgh. I'm a business student, so I'm a little different from what you guys are doing, I think. But yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Joanna?
Hi, I'm Joanna. I'm a third-year med student at Penn, studying between EM and internal medicine. So COVID is definitely really relevant to both of them.
Perfect. Thank you. Leah?
Hi, I'm Leah. I am taking some time off before starting med school, hopefully this fall. And I was working as a ski patroller, but now tutoring from home.
Thank you very much. Next, Vivek.
All right. Hi, I'm Vivek. I'm a third-year medical student at Penn. Looking to go into internal medicine. Great to see everybody again. I'm very excited to get started.
Thank you. Erin, please.
I'm a second-year med student at the University of Hawaii. Yeah, my name is Erin.
Thank you. Philip.
Hi, I'm Philip, third-year medical student at Penn.
Thank you. Laura?
Hi, I'm Laura. I'm also a third-year medical student at Penn.
Thank you. We have Alex.
Hey guys, Alex, also third-year med student here at Penn.
Thank you. Ashwin, please.
Hey guys, Ashwin, also third-year med student at Penn.
Thank you. Casey, a couple more to go.
Hi, yeah, I'm Casey. I'm also third-year med student at Penn.
Thank you. Anna.
Hi, hey guys,
There we
I'm
go.
Anna, third-year med student at Penn.
Perfect. And then Beatrice, right? Or do you prefer to go by B? I don't remember from yesterday.
Either is fine, but Beatrice or
Fantastic.
B. Yeah, I'm a third-year med student at Penn too.
Perfect. And I think Michael just dropped off. So welcome back to Michael. So first, and then we have David, if you want to say something before we really jump into it.
Sure. Yeah. So I got a chance to connect with many of you guys yesterday. Those of you that are new, thanks so much for joining this fight. I run a center at Penn called the Center for Study and Treatment of Castleman's and Inflammatory Lymphadenopathies. I also run a foundation called the Castleman Disease Collaborative Network, and I'm excited that you guys have all joined on this team to try to get through all of the published papers as soon as possible to understand what drugs are working, what drugs are not working. As of yesterday, we were, I think it was a little bit over maybe 1,000 articles. Now I think it's up to, is it 1,200 now, Johnson?
Yeah, 1213.
Yeah, 1213. So the numbers, and they're going to go up exponentially. So like last week, there were 400 papers. So almost half of all papers up until that point were in 1 week relative to the previous 3 months. So the numbers are going to really start shooting up. So I think, we have a really ambitious goal. And I know I sent out numbers earlier today, so you guys saw kind of how we've been doing. But if you guys can really help to, put in some serious horsepower these next 3 days, the ideal point would be that by, these next 3 or 4 days, if we get like fully caught up, and then we kind of use that as our line in the sand, that like we went through the full published literature as of that day. And then we analyze what should be, it's actually going to be several thousand patients worth of data from these first 1,000 or so papers. So yeah, if you guys can help us to put the horsepower in, then I think we can do what should be a really important service to physicians and scientists and most importantly to patients.
Perfect. Thank you, David. So first off, I want to open the floor to see if you guys have any like broad general questions before we get into sort of how we're going to be going through it and sort of the step-by-step process that we'd like you guys to take. So any broad questions? Perfect. If you have questions, feel free to stop me. It's likely if you guys are thinking it, someone else has it. And we're also at the very end, if you guys have questions about really anything related to the project, we'll have time for that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so you guys should all see my screen right now. So the first thing I want to bring up is that this is our Castle page for the Center for the Study and Treatment of Calcium and Inflammatory Lymphadenopathies. There's this drug repurposing tab, and that'll bring you to this page if you want to tell people about what you're doing and the work that you guys are doing, or if you want to find more information about our immune map, our drug repurposing, or this link to the Milken Institute. So this is a good place for you guys to start. Once you guys have been trained, so likely later today, I'll add all of your names to this little guy right here. Just so that I'm aware, can you guys see when my cursor is moving, or can you not? You cannot see when the cursor moves. All right, then that is something for me to know, so we'll move on. I'll be a little more intentional about that. Oh, you can. Okay, you're muted, David, so I'm glad I saw you. So you can't see my cursor moving. This page is our Google Drive, and all of you guys should have access to this right now. It should be to whatever email address that you gave me that you wanted to have access to. If you don't have access to it, please let me know, and I'll make sure to get it to you after this meeting. So we have three main folders here. There's our annotated papers folder, our clean paper folder. None of you should really need this clean paper PDFs. This folder is mainly for individuals who might not be able to get behind the paywall of PubMed and might not be able to get access to these articles. But you guys should all be able to through your institution. And then there's this immune map folder that our PhD student Ruth Ann is working on. Inside of here, we also have our two files. We have our protocol file and then the actual spreadsheet that you guys are going to be doing your analysis on. So this is our protocol. I hope you guys were all able to get a chance to read through it. I did get a couple questions yesterday from people who read through and found places that they had questions about. If you're reading through, you have questions, feel free to send them to the Slack, feel free to send it to me, and I'll share aggregate questions to the Slack as well, so that we make sure that everyone has sort of up-to-date information. We make sure that we're doing this as systemically as possible. And then this is the form, the sheet that we're using in order to really systematically go through the literature. So the thing that you see right now is the second tab here, this full citation list. And this is something that I'll be updating probably daily, maybe every other day if I get a little caught up and don't get to it. But this is updated as of this morning, and this should be the entire literature that searches for COVID-19, for SARS-CoV-19, or the other name that I'm blanking on right now. But there's no real way that you have to go about going through them. As long as every article gets read, that's great. Some people like going chronologically from the oldest article and move forward. Some people are jumping around to what seems important to them. Feel free to do whatever works best for you. Just make sure that when you pick an article and you put it in, you make sure under this Castle team column here that you put your initials, put that you're reviewing it, that you've read it. So it'll either be yes, if you have reviewed it, and then blank if it hasn't been reviewed at this point. You'll read through the abstract or skim through the paper and see if there's anything that talks about drug repurposing. As David said yesterday, any drug that's being used right now is a repurposed drug. We don't have any drugs that are actively on label for COVID-19 yet. So essentially, if they mention a drug or mention a type of treatment, you'll put yes in this column. And then once you move it from this full citation list to this reviewed sheet, you'll put yes here in this column that it has been reviewed and then you've put it in. And then this last one is really so that we can have a little bit more data on what sort of article it is. And so if you go up here to the comment, there's a couple things in here. So you either have a case report, and so that's talking about really one patient, one hospital, one situation, one group. You have a case series. We haven't seen any of these yet where they might be following a patient or a couple of patients longitudinally. A review article, we've seen a couple of these. Or a research study, if it's an epidemiological prevention article, if they're abstracts that don't have any data, or doesn't fit nicely into one of these, but it's not something that you're putting in, you can always put it in as other. One thing that we'd like to highlight is this research study. And so if you see any clinical research, so say they're doing stuff on RT-PCR, if they do a cytokine panel, if they're doing some in vitro studies, looking at what drugs work best in cell lines, things like that. Those are all things to put in this research study column, which is really important because our PhD student, Ruth Ann, is then going through all of the articles that you guys mark as research studies and adding them onto her immune map. So any questions thus far before we go into a study and we start picking it through together? No? Perfect. So I already picked one for us. So this is the case study that I sent out yesterday. Hopefully all of you guys were able to take a chance to read through it and have a little bit more information about it. As you'll see, we put our name here. Actually, I'll change the group so that we get it as a group. It's been reviewed, there is drug repurposing, and it's entered. And then we're going to move this information over to this review tab. And I already put it in here so that we at least have a placeholder. And so the things on this review tab that are important for you guys to know, we sort of ran through them yesterday, but I'm going to go through it again, so bear with me. So Castle team member, put your initials in. First author is going to be the last name, first initial of the author, paper title, PubMed ID, pretty standard. The next questions that they're going to ask for is whether or not you have patient level data or summary level data. And so you'll put that in. If it has this enter and then two options here, we'd like you to be as systemic as possible to put one of those two options. This will make analysis down the line a little bit easier because we have a lot of patients and a lot of papers that are coming through. All of this information that's in this top header is also in this data dictionary that's down here, which I'll open up, and it gives you a little bit more elucidation onto what each column is supposed to be if you're ever confused if you have any questions. So patient level summary data, the number of patients within the paper, this question has come up a lot. And so we're going to talk about it just briefly. If a paper says that there are 6 patients and they give individual data for every single patient and what drugs they got, you'll put patient 1, patient 2, patient 3, patient 4, on and on. If it just has aggregate data, so it says that you're looking at 138 patients altogether and what they got as a whole, you'll just put 138 here and then you'll leave the rest blank. Nationality for the paper, if the paper states what nationality the patient is, that's important for us. General demographics, age, sex, age, sex, comorbidities, if they're listed. If anything is not listed, we want to make sure that we're not leaving blanks in because it's hard for the analysis later on. We're putting NR, which stands for not reported, so that at least there's something in that block. We're going to try really hard not to have any blanks where we could have something there. And then we have our method of confirmation. If a paper comes up where they haven't been tested positive at any time, please bring it up. We have had a couple papers thus far that say that via RT, PCR, or antibody test, the patient was negative, but clinically we decided they were. That's something that we'll look at as a group and probably ask David to look at to decide whether or not we want to include this information in or not. If they've ever been hospitalized, if they've ever been on ventilation, if they've ever been in the ICU. This question right here is also sort of finicky in that you could say that if the paper doesn't specifically say that they've been in the ICU, that they have not been in the ICU, which makes sense from a logical standpoint, but we're only putting no in if the paper specifically says that they were not admitted to the ICU, if that makes sense. If they make no mention of it, make sure to put not reported. Severity is something that will be really interesting for us to do moving forward, and that is only if the article states it. I did pick one today that does say that it's severe, so that'll give us a little more data. This peak CRP, please make sure to put the units in if they give it to you, because some of them, as these papers are coming from all around the world, they're all using different units. So if you can put it in the unit, milligrams per liter, or whatever unit they have there. This right here is where we get to the fun part. We're looking at the repurposed drug name, the day and disease course, and then we'll talk about the rest of these as we go through this paper. So I'm going to go through here. So a lot of you will know how to go to PubMed already, but we're going to talk about it just in case. So all of these articles are, you can draw them from PubMed. So you just Google PubMed, this site will show up. The easiest way to search for it is to just take that PubMed ID number, click search, and you'll get your article. Sometimes the whole article will be here, sometimes it won't. So if you go to this full text links here, you can pull that up. We'll wait for it to load. Maybe should have loaded it beforehand. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to download the PDF onto your hard drive. And so some of them, you're going to have to do a little searching to find that PDF button. This one's right here. You'll download it. I already downloaded it, so I'm going to split my screen here so that we can see both. You guys can see both screens right now, right? Yes? Perfect. And so first thing you want to do is you want to download it. We're asking that anytime you abstract any information from a paper to put into the spreadsheet that you highlight it. So if you're on a PC and you have Adobe, it's really easy. It's this highlight tool. If you're on a Mac, I don't know your analog, but you should be able to. So you'll definitely be able to. If you can't figure it out, let me know. We'll work it through together. But the first thing you want to do is get ready to highlight. Some of these papers won't be really easy to highlight. An easy way to make them more highlightable is if you use this enhanced scans function. This is only if you have a paid version of Adobe though. If you don't, no worries. We can have a little scraggly lines and it'll be just okay. So if you've read it, you already know that this is a single case study. It's talking about one patient. So we're going to put that this is patient level information. We know that there's only one patient within this paper. We know the nationality because they tell us where the patient is from. And so we have, I should probably be highlighting, we have a 61-year-old male from the Hangzhou district of Wuhan. And so we know this patient is Chinese. We know the patient is 61 years old. We know he's a male. And so we'll continue reading on. Yes.
With the nationality, do we care, like, do we care about where they're being treated? Is that really what we're asking? Or do we care about, like, what nation they're, you know?
Yeah, so it'll be who they are and not where they're treated. We've seen a couple papers where, like a paper I just read this morning, which was a Korean man being treated in China. Tell us about really, I guess maybe ethnicity is a better word for that, but who they are. Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Give me a chance to take a sip of coffee too.
And I would just also,
so we'll continue reading.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to interrupt really quickly to say that, you know, if it's hard to tease out from the paper, then that's okay to obviously to leave that NR. So if you're not sure, then you can easily leave that NR. I don't think that we're going to do any sort of like subgroup analyses based on nationality of the individual. And as you guys know, nationality is a challenging term to define because it's, you know, where they are now, where the person is now. Ethnicity and race is also challenging to define. And so I think just do the best you can. And if you can't figure it out, just put NR.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Yeah, definitely feel free to put NRs where you need them. If you have questions and you're a little bit on the fence, that's where the Slack is a great option for us to talk about it, and we can make sure that we're making these decisions together. So moving on, patient was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. We'll put that here in our comorbidities 2 years ago. And then this is a moment where we can talk about drugs. So it says that he received this with metformin. Both of these drugs, I'm not even going to try to say it well. First one, alogliptin, maybe that's it. Co-administered with metformin. Both of these drugs are mentioned here, but they're not mentioned in a form where they're trying to treat COVID-19 with these drugs. And so these two drugs are two drugs that won't need to go in. So if you have an example of a drug that's very clearly used to treat something else that the patient has had and will have afterwards, it could be that these have maybe an effect, but it'll be hard to tease that up, so there's no need to put those in. So we won't put those two in. We'll move forward and continue reading. Due to shortage of tests, real-time polymerase chain reaction for detection of coronavirus formed on February 3rd, which gave a positive result. So anytime you're pulling any information, make sure to highlight all of that, so we know that this was real-time PCR. We know that.
Johnson, just want to interrupt really quick. You made this great point about the type 2 diabetes treatment. Sometimes it can be kind of vague as to, it's unclear, like, you know, whether to enter it or not. Generally enter every drug that you come across, but just as Johnson said, in this case, we know that the type 2 diabetes existed before COVID. Type 2 diabetes is going to exist in this patient after COVID. The concomitant use of metformin and this other diabetes medication probably is just noise within our data set. The doctors were not using either of those drugs with any hope that it could help. So that's why we leave them out. But generally, if it's a drug, put it in. It might be something where it's worth putting it in than just asking Johnson or I the question. But this is an example where we would say leave out those two drugs, even though generally we say put everything else in.
Thank you, David. And then also one thing I forgot to highlight as I realized as I go through is it says here January 28th, 2020 is when the patient reported this fevers and started going to clinic. I would write this down or make a note of this date because that date's going to be day one for you. Day one, it's sort of arbitrary as to where you choose your day one. You can either choose it to be the first day of sickness or the first day of admission, whichever one feels like has the most data for you, because we're really looking for from day one of getting their drug or whatever it is, how long until they get to remission. So your start date can be a little arbitrary as long as the dates in between are pretty set. So I took note of this January 28, 2020. Moving forward, we have that real-time PCR. We see that February 1st through 4th, he starts developing symptoms. On February 4th, he was referred, quarantined, and treated in this hospital. And so we know that the patient was hospitalized. We can move on. So on admission, so I would just write down January 28th, 2020, and then February 4th, he was admitted. And that would be day 7, he was admitted. If you look at a calendar, I had to look at a calendar. Please look at them, because I always forget which months have 30 and 31 and 28. So use your calendars, friends. So on admission, you have your physical examination, read through respiratory rate of 30 breaths per minute and oxygen saturation, which reached 91, while the patient was given max flow oxygen at a rate of 5 liters per minute. So this will be non-invasive ventilation, so we'll put a yes there. So he's getting the supplemental oxygen, and you have a bunch of lab values. You see that he's getting worse. You see that they did an antigen-antibody combination that gave this HIV positive result. And so we can also go back here to comorbidities and say that this patient has HIV. Put that comma there. And then we see that he has oral therapy with anti-HIV drugs, leponavir and ritonavir. And he gets it twice daily for 12 days. And so we'll skip forward a little bit, and we'll see that we have these repurposed drugs. So,
and Johnson, just a quick comment here. So this is like a unique case where the patient has HIV and is also being treated with an HIV drug for COVID-19. And so it specifically says here, you know, that they're giving this for the COVID-19. So this is where it's very clear, just as Johnson's doing, you put it in because this is being used to treat the COVID-19.
Because it also says,
sorry, are we including nasal cannula as mechanical ventilation?
So it's a good question. This is really where it starts getting a little gray. So there's invasive ventilation where you have a trach tube, and that's clearly a ventilator. There's non-invasive ventilation where you have a kind of an airtight mask where it's really breathing for you. And then there's non-invasive, oxygen supplementation. Sometimes you can have high flow oxygen supplementation, which kind of acts more like a non-invasive ventilator. I think in this case, Johnson, I would actually not include this, even though there is a mask. So that's where it gets confusing. If you have a mask with a complete seal, then we're going to call that non-invasive ventilation. But if you have a mask that's just got high flow oxygen, then we would call that no to mechanical ventilation. Although this patient may go on to need to be added to a ventilator. Although no, we're almost at the end of the paper. So I'm sorry, I know that's unclear, but the reason we're asking about ventilation is that we want to categorize the really sick people that need, a machine to breathe for them. That's who we're looking for.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have these two drugs, and we know that it was repurposed. It was started on admission, and so we know that that's February 4th because that's what they set up here. You can say that it was started on day 7. Number of patients is 1 at this point, and then we'll move forward. We'll go up. Patient was also given moxifloxacin Loxaphin for 7 days, gamma globulin for 3 days, and the methylphenidazone for 3 days through IV. So we can put all of those in as well. Make sure to spell them right, because sometimes I have nothing and going back and you go, well, that's not right. If you can highlight, copy, paste, that's even better. It's a little hard once you highlight it. So we also know, because it says also, we're going to say they also started day 7, moving down, 1 patient per. On February 9th, patient showed marked clinical and radiological improvement. Oxygen saturation was measured above on nasal cannula. And then 2 additional throat swabs were obtained on February 15th, and both were tested negative for the patient's stable condition and discharged on February 17th. So that's all information that's going to go in here. So there's nothing here that specifically says that these drugs led to his improvement. It could be that the patient was going to improve and just got these drugs. If it says something like antigen antibody combination of leponavir and ritonavir led to decrease in fever or something like that, then we'll put yes in this author indicated response. But as there's not really strong language that dictates that it is a correlation, we're going to put that it's not reported. There are indications where you'll have something where it says that, I'll use leponavir again. If leponavir was started, patient did not improve, and there was progression of disease, at that point, you'll put that the patient did not have a good response to it, and the author indicates that it's not something that is helpful. If an important thing is that if the patient dies while they're on the drug, you'll also put no, even though it doesn't specifically correlate with that. We have no response there. Since we have it's not reported, we put not reported all the way down. So day in disease course where symptoms were noted to begin improving. So that'll be this February 9th. So it says the patient showed marked clinical and radiological improvement. Difference between the column W and column X, where column W is days and disease symptoms were noted to begin improving. This is sort of when they start improving. So if you have 1 or 2 symptoms that start going away, you'll put that there. If you have full resolution, that's if they say full resolution, no clinical abnormalities, no inflammatory indices, something like that. So in this case, because it just says marked improvement and doesn't say anything about no symptomology, we're going to put it here as February 9th is day 12. I did the math, so I have it down, but please do that math. Day 12 as the date of improvement. There's nothing that says a date of complete resolution, so we'll put no response there or not reported. We know that the patient had 2 additional RT-PCR assays on February 15th, and so that's day 18. We'll put that here. Sorry, the page up and page down are right next to the keyboard, so sometimes that happens. And then the day that the patient is discharged. The patient is stable condition and discharged on the 17th. So that's going to lead us to day 20. Perfect. And then this column right here, we used to only have 1 column that had these 4. So any new ones, you won't need to put anything there. But we kept this column for the previous cases that have information there until we move it over. So that old column, you're not going to need to put anything in here. Justification for timing of resolution. This is a text box, so you're going to want to quote directly from this paper and put it in here. So it's going to be a little bit of typing. So we'll say that on 9 February.
Johnson, are you able to copy that? Is it because the highlighting is challenging? Is that the problem?
Yeah, the highlighting is going to make it a little challenging in terms of the formatting, but if you are okay moving the formatting around.
Yeah, I would always recommend that if you put a quote in to copy and paste so that it's definitely a full quote and that there isn't misinformation. But yeah, I can see how that's annoying because you've highlighted, you're not able to like copy a huge chunk. But I do think that I
It'll
think
take
that
you.
anytime you put a quote in, I think it's worth doing it that way rather than typing, because we see mistakes all the time when it's typed.
Oh, let me. There we go.
Cool. And does that make sense to everyone for why we have that extra cell, that extra column, so that way it's easy for someone reviewing the data to look and say, okay, well, why did they pick those dates? Oh, well, this is why they picked it, because this is what's written in the text.
Can I just ask a quick question on the timing?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I understand that what we're looking at is the course of the disease after essentially the drugs have been initiated, but I'm kind of curious how we would deal with like discrepancies of when someone, the day one being when they are symptomatic versus day one being in the hospital, because I feel like that has a huge difference in terms of the course of their disease.
It's a great question. So you're exactly right. And everyone's going to have a different day one. But what we're really looking at is the delta between the day that drugs are started and when resolutions happen. So it's that difference between day 5 when a drug started and day 20 when the disease has complete improvement. Because you're right. We aren't going to, the absolute number doesn't matter. It's the relative difference between the start of a drug and when someone gets better. Does that answer the question? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I just, I guess in my mind, I would be concerned that someone would respond differently if they were at the end of their disease versus if they were just picked up that day. So like that would be like a confounding variable.
I see your question, and that makes a lot of sense. You're totally right. I think that, yes, so you're right. If you get, let's say you're given toenail fungus medication the day before you were already going to get better. Did the toenail fungus medication do anything, the day before you were already going to get better? Now it looks like you got better a day after you got toenail fungus medication. So you're exactly right. There's going to be, it's a challenging data set to work with for that exact reason, that things get started at different time courses, whether you were really sick or whether you're really healthy. And I think that another challenge of this we spoke about yesterday is that the natural history for 80+% of patients is that they will be cured. Many of those patients would have been cured with no medication whatsoever. And so when you have a heterogeneous disease like this, where some people would have spontaneous remissions, others would have died without medication, it gets really, really complicated. So the best we can do is kind of list out all of the things that have been tried, and then get some general average times from initiation of therapy to when people have resolution of symptoms. But you're right, this is a challenging data set, which is, I think, partly why we want to publish, but we also want to make the data available so that other people can maybe think about it in different ways.
The last column here. Yeah, of course. Any other questions right now before we move on? Perfect, thank you. The last column here is whether or not the patient survived. The patient was discharged, asked to isolate at home, so we know the patient survived. This is also a yes, no question. Please put it in there. If it gives you a conglomerate of information, say you have 138 patients and 14 are deceased, and whatever that number is, 124 survive, you can just put that proportion here. So then that finishes the paper. Describes the patient with HIV recovered from coronavirus-related pneumonia. Among the patients, HIV-infected individuals need to be regarded as vulnerable. So I did pick a paper that is a little on the shorter side, a little more straightforward with some of the other ones. But what's important to do is, even once you think you finished, go back to the beginning, make sure you didn't forget anything, because I know there's a couple things we haven't talked about yet. So patient level data, never one patient. Let's see, moving forward. Let's see. So the patient was never explicitly put into the ICU, so this is going to be not reported. We didn't talk about it, but We report on an identified unique severe case involving co-infection. Sometimes what might be easy is if you do a control find for severe, and that'll help you so that you can make sure you're not missing it in case you're reading it through. So this is going to be severe. Once again, your three options: severe, not reported. This paper didn't have any lab values in here. And so if you want, you can do a CRP, no response. So we're going to put not reported here. Anything where you didn't actively pull that information out, it might be worth just doing a quick control find just to make sure that you're not missing anything. Scroll through, make sure that you have indices, things in every single column, which we do in this case. So at that point, what you'll do is you'll save this to wherever you're going to save it, and then you'll go back into your COVID-19 folder, go to this annotated paper PDFs folder, and then upload that file in here. I found that it's easier to just make a folder where I'm just putting all of these paper PDFs. And at the end of the day, I'm just copying all the ones that I did and put them in there at once versus going back and forth every time, but it's up to you how you want to do it. This one. So then you can upload that, make sure that doesn't take an hour and 49 minutes, but make sure that you are uploading that information in there. Anytime that you have information that you write down or information that you've highlighted, make sure it goes into the spreadsheet. We recommend putting things directly from your paper that you're highlighting directly into the spreadsheet if all possible. Sometimes you may need to take like a couple notes in terms of dates. So like my notebook has like dates so that I can do the math between the dates, but make sure to put that information as well. Once you've done that, you're completely done with that paper, and then you can move on to the next one. Do you have any questions thus far on how to put a paper together and how to abstract or extract that information here?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Do we want to record their like smoking status as a comorbidity?
That's a good question for David. If David has thoughts on that. I didn't, but patient was a heavy smoker with between 20 to 30 cigarettes a day.
It's a good
Would
question.
you like that as a comorbidity, David?
You could probably go either way. I'm going to say no. If the patient has emphysema or COPD or lung cancer, throw it in there. But I would just say leave that out. Like if they say, heavy drinker, heavy smoker, unless they specifically say alcohol use disorder, or if they say emphysema or COPD. But we'll just try to keep it to like pure diseases. Good question, though.
And then I had a question about just papers that have like aggregate level analyses. So like say there's like a I don't know, like a survey of like 13 patients, and they're just characterizing like maybe 8 out of 13 are in the ICU or something to that level. Is it how exactly are we doing that? Is it just everything on one line and just writing the fractions there, or?
Yeah, let me scroll up so I can find one where we've done that. So this one is clinical characteristics of 138 hospitalized patients. Let me try to full screen. So it's a little bit easier to read. So with this one, we have this one looked at 138 patients. You have your average age that they gave you, your spread, and then the number of patients. You have your sex, 75 male, 63 female. You have comorbidities, and so you can just list out what they tell you. So this one told us these are the number of patients with these comorbidities. And then, like, I think your question is sort of like this one, where it says ever on mechanical ventilation. So this paper specifically told us that out of the 138, 36 of them were put on mechanical ventilation. And so you can just put that proportion there. So 36 out of 138. Clearly, we're not asking you to make 138 rows for this paper, because that would be exorbitant. And it's not really necessary because they don't give us that granular data. If we move across this paper, it tells us that out of all of the patients, so all 38, 124 of them received Tamiflu, 89 of them got moxifloxacin. And so you can just put that number there. And that's where this number of patients on drug in this paper comes in handy. Is it might seem really redundant to just put once where you have a case report, but for papers like this that have aggregate data, it's really important so that we know sort of proportion-wise Does that answer your question?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
And then I would just add something really quickly. So totally agree with Johnson. This is a case where we don't have a patient-by-patient data. But let's say this hypothetical, which thankfully doesn't exist, but a hypothetical paper where there are 138 patients, and they do provide patient level data about all 138. Like there's a giant spreadsheet in the supplement where it's like patient 1 got this drug and this drug and this drug. Patient 2 got this drug and this drug and this drug. Then I would say to put all 138 patients into this spreadsheet. As you guys know, papers that report out 100 plus patients typically don't give patient by patient information. And so that's where you enter in the groups. So it's like the averages, the numbers of drugs per, the number of patients per drug. But, and that's why we have you in one of the earlier columns state whether this is per patient data or summary data. So the summary data, we understand it's different. That's a good example. There's 9 patients in that one paper above in row 30. And you can see that it's, it's not broken out. But if it is broken out in a supplement, list them all out.
Yeah, thank you, David. This is the next thing I was going to go to follow up on that point. This paper, I don't have it for you, so you can't read it. So I'll have to take my word for it. But this paper gave us something like patients 1, 5, and 6 all received this regimen of these drugs here, and patients 2, 6, 2, 4, 8 received this regimen, and then gave us individual data on that point. And so that's why we were able to make these rows with these patients, because we know what they got and how they got it, and had this granular data. Perfect. Any other questions?
I have a question. I noticed in some of the repurposed drug name, like in that column, in some of the patients included stuff like high flow oxygen therapy or low flow oxygen therapy. In what circumstances should we put stuff in that column versus like in the mechanical ventilation column?
So that could also be because we just added mechanical ventilation yesterday.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's a relatively new column, so we haven't been putting them in. But speaking of repurposed drugs, anytime they say they're using anything, so because these patients are, a lot of the patients that are coming out on these initial case reports are coming from Wuhan, a lot of them are being treated with alternative medicines, so complementary therapies, like these right here. So they're being treated with herbal things. We want to make sure to put those in as well. As long as it's, the rule that we've made is that as long as it's not a traditional food item, we'll be putting them in. So things like, not even going to try to say them, but these guys here, we'll put them in if they say patient takes honey and lemon for a sore throat. We're not going to add that data in. But that is a good point that I was going to bring up later. So thank you for segueing nicely into that. I think there was someone else with a question.
Yeah, I just had a question. I see that some of the repurposed drug names have things like amoxicillin 2 times a day, or like I think there was like a methylprednisone, like 1 to 2 mg per kg per day. But like in general, it doesn't seem like there's a column for like actual like drug doses or like how frequently people are taking. So I guess I was just a little bit curious on like what I guess like the thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so we didn't add a column here for dosage or how often they got it, when they got it in there. I think we were more concerned with what did they get. And then I don't know if you want to speak about that any more than that, David. That was my impression, but I feel like you have more to say.
Yeah, a lot of case reports don't report dosage and frequency. So as a result, we're not capturing it. I think that it's fine that that person put it in, but I don't think it's necessary because just as Johnson said, we're not going to be looking at low doses versus high doses. We're just going to say what drugs were used. And then I think that readers could potentially go back to the source papers to get a sense for, for what dosing was used.
Any other questions?
I have a quick
so I think she has a question.
Yeah, about the last 3 columns. So after surviving, drug indications, mechanisms of action, and recommendation indications, do you want us to be filling them well?
So you guys don't have to fill them out right now. The idea is that we'll go through, we'll fill in all of the information on a granular point, and then we'll go back and add that information in. That way we don't have all of you looking up like what's the mechanism of action of Tamiflu or what's happening with this complementary alternative medicine. The idea is that we'll go back once we congregate them all together and then just congregate them. All right, any other questions?
So to Philip's point about oxygen, for Philip's point about oxygen therapy. So if we have a patient that does not receive any invasive or non-invasive oxygen, does not receive any specific drug, but does receive, let's say, like high flow nasal cannula, just 2 liters nasal cannula. Do you want that to be in the drug repurposing, or should we just not list that whatsoever?
I'm going to defer that to David.
Sure. So some people are putting it in as drug as a treatment, and some people aren't. I think the fact that people have gone through and have not been including it, I think that my bias would be to say we don't need to include it moving forward. I think that what we really care about is were they on some sort of ventilation that's like basically breathing for them, because that tells us they were really, really, really sick. I mean, basically everyone who goes into the hospital that is hospitalized for COVID-19 is likely going to get some sort of supplemental oxygen. So we don't really worry as much about that. And then I think that we all know the potential benefits and likely limitations of supplemental oxygen. So I would say we can leave supplemental oxygen out as a row. And then, you know, for our analysis purposes, we'll probably end up removing those, the ones that have already been entered. Does that answer your question?
No, yeah, absolutely. And I guess a follow-up would be, where would ECMO lie on this spectrum?
Oh boy. Yeah. So ECMO is like, ventilators not even working. Let's move to ECMO. And so I had not considered the fact that in theory, someone could go straight to ECMO. But usually there's a bridge with a ventilator in between. And so as long as we got that they were on a ventilator, then we got that they were really severe. But of course, some people can get, in theory, you could go right to ECMO. And ECMO is basically where your heart and your lungs are being completely replaced by a machine. So I think that if you get in a case where you know they're on ECMO and they did not get, and there's no indication that they received ventilation. So this particular patient, the nice part is that they did have non-invasive and invasive ventilation before ECMO. So the nice thing is we're going to capture that they were on a ventilator. So that's going to put them into our severe category. If we wanted, we could add another column for ECMO, and that would be like this most severe of the most severe. But I don't know if that's necessary. I think that our numbers are going to be low. I don't think ECMO is probably going to be more than 5% of cases. So Johnson, do you have any sense? And for others on the call, I would say only if someone you see they were on ECMO and it doesn't say they're on a ventilator, flag that, and then we may end up just making a rule that if we know someone was on ECMO, then we make that a yes for mechanical ventilation or something like that, where it's like mechanical ventilation or ECMO.
Yeah, my bias is because I thought there was that bridge between being totally healthy and ECMO, where like you should be on a ventilator in between. So I thought that having mechanical ventilation would capture that, and I had in my head put ECMO in and sort of lumped that in that group as well. So I don't think we need to put another column in for that at this moment, unless it turns out that people are flagging tons of articles with it. Then I think that's something to take another column for. Thank you for that, Alex. Any other questions? No? Fantastic. Then I just have a couple things. Yes.
Are we including any prophylactic treatments or just for people with known infection?
At least for me, the other half of your question didn't come through. I just hit up to prophylactic.
Do you want us to include studies that use medications prophylactically, or should we exclude those?
So that's to David as well.
Sure. So I would say exclude those cases. So this is someone, maybe I think right now there's a study of giving healthcare professionals hydroxychloroquine to see if that prevents them from getting it in the first place. I think that those studies we would exclude. We would only include. We have a column which is like it's something about positivity. So it's kind of like how we're testing positive. Let's see what's the wording we use. Method of confirmation of COVID-19 positivity. So we need to know that. So I think we should make this review just limited to people that we know are positive. And now, if someone is part of a study where you're trying to prevent COVID-19, and a patient in that study gets COVID-19, I would include them in this. And we can list that was a drug that they were on early in their course. But I think that if they were on a drug, they didn't get COVID-19, and they were in a paper, I wouldn't think to include that. It's a really good question though.
Yeah, and then to jump on that question as well, that would be something where you could flag it as a research study for our PhD student to look at as well. So just a thing to continue thinking about is anytime there's any like research being done with it and not just like a pure clinical case report. That's something that's interesting, and that's something that our PhD student would love to read about, especially if you guys are already reading through these papers so that she doesn't have to parse through them. Yeah. Anything else? Or else I'm going to take the last 5 minutes to just go over a couple more things for you guys. Okay? Fantastic. So once you guys have gone through that, you're going to go through, you'll pull another one from this full citation list. If you come across a paper that has, so this one, practice and reflection of the battle against COVID-19 in Guangdong Medical Aid Team in the city of Huangpu or something. And you read it, you reviewed it, you looked at the abstract, you sort of skimmed the paper. If the abstract made it seem like there was something there and there wasn't anything, put no for drug repurposing, put no that it's entered, put what type of paper you think it is, and then move on to the next one. As a reminder, we're looking for about at least a minimum of about 10 papers that are reviewed without drug repurposing, and then one that has drug repurposing in there. That's an absolute baseline. If you have the capacity and the willpower and want to continue going, we would love for you to continue going. We would love for you to continue adding more papers on there, but we want to have that baseline just to make sure that everyone's at the same level and everyone's putting in their work on it daily. Once you have that there, the status dictionary, like I said, is really important. I would recommend before you guys start, just sort of reading through the data dictionary and make sure that you understand what each column is meant to be and what things you're supposed to put there, especially for these guys that are short text character, where we have really specific things we want you to put. And try really hard not to deviate from what's here, because that'll just make analysis down the road a lot harder with 1,000+ papers. Let's see, anything else on the review for the Q&A? Yeah, make sure to add your cohesive timeline. The complementary alternative medicine point we brought up already. Let's see. Yeah, there are some articles that are just going to be the abstracts. Like I said, a lot of these papers are coming from China. They might be written originally in Chinese, and they might not have been translated over to English yet. Most of them should have an English abstract to read from it, so you can at least read that if need be. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, leave them for someone else who will be translated and move forward with it. Let's see. I think that, this question came up earlier and it's really important. If the drug doesn't work and there's a negative effect, please put it in still. We want to make sure that we avoid sort of what we think might be a bias coming forward, where people like publishing about patients that live and they don't like publishing about patients who die. And so that's really important too, to know what works and what doesn't work. Even more so maybe to know what doesn't work, so we know what not to prescribe or how not to prescribe it. So if there is a negative effect, please put it in. If an article reviews a drug that was tested for a different type of infection, you don't need to put those in. A lot of these review articles will say we looked at SARS, or we looked at how this works against influenza, which is great, but not really helpful in the terms of our study. We're looking really for COVID-19 things. And then we've also hit a couple of retracted articles, so you don't need to put anything from these retracted articles as well. That puts us at 1:57. Does anyone have any last questions before we wrap up? I want to make sure that we respect your time and respect that we put this down for an hour, so you guys should be here for about anything. screen sharing. That way I can at least see all of y'all and make sure that you guys don't look and have very quizzical faces at me. Perfect. You all look like you have comprehension. You all look like you're smiling, and I can bore you for an hour. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You guys should all have access to the Slack channel at this point. You should all have access to the Drive. Make sure that you can get in. A couple people did email me yesterday saying they didn't have access. So we want to make sure you have access so you guys can hit the ground running at this point. If you have any questions, put them on the Slack. Feel free to either send them to David, and we'll put them through. And then we'll make sure that we're going to hit our 1,000 papers by the end of the week or in the next 10 days or so. Anything else you'd like to add before closing up, David?
Yeah, first off, thank you so much to Johnson. Johnson's doing an awesome job leading this effort. I also just wanted to see, like, does everyone feel like, I mean, basically at this stage, we're like saying you're fully trained, like, does everyone on this call know how to get access to PubMed published articles? Does everyone know that, like, right after this call, they could go online, they can start finding these papers, they can get the full text of them, because sometimes you have to go through academic institutions to get them. Does everyone feel like you could sign off and just go right to work? Or are there any questions about, like, well, I'm not really sure what I'd have to do to get started, like, at 2 o'clock today? Everyone feels good? Cool.
Got a couple thumbs up. That's always a good
Nice.
sign.
Okay. Great. Well, yeah, of course, if you're feeling hesitant and you want to talk to Johnson or myself, obviously you can message us offline. But yeah, I mean, we have an ambitious goal. And like I said, if we can try to get to all of them by the end of this week, then I think that we're going to be in a really good position. Every week, I think, like, next week, there might be 1,000 papers. And so, you know, if we can get a hold of things and synthesize, get this out to the community as quickly as possible, I think that would be amazing.
Well, thank you very much. We'll let you go a minute early, but feel free to reach out if you have any questions, okay?
All right. Thanks,
Have a great
guys.
day. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnson. Great work.